Jesus is still talking to his disciples in the crowd, and he starts to turn towards what parts of the law, what parts of the Old Testament instructions are still applicable. And it's a question a bunch of us have asked. We don't necessarily want to look at the Old Testament. Sometimes we get bored by it. We don't want to read about the culture in those days or the way the Jews had to practice their worship, because we understand that the New Testament has made things different, that there's a new covenant. The 613 commands of the Old Testament aren't exactly what we're always asked to apply, or at least that's what we convince ourselves of. That the instructions and commands and laws God had given to his people maybe aren't what's most important. And we, looking back, see the grace that's to come and the power over sin and death that Jesus gives us through his death and resurrection. But before that happens, he actually addresses those modern believers of his time. What part of the law is important? What instructions and commands do we need to follow? He says this to those disciples who have been with him. Don't think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Jesus looks at his disciples and he says, I haven't come to rid you of the way that you live with a perfect and holy God. I haven't come to ignore those instructions or to rid the world of the need to follow those. Instead, I've come to show you what it looks like to fulfill them. He goes on actually to say that not one letter, not one stroke of the pen will be ignored from the law. That everything needs to be accomplished before we're ever free from the instructions in the commands of God. Often in our lives, we've started to evaluate or skip reading the Old Testament law because we think it just doesn't apply. It was for a different people at a different time, and we live in the era of grace now, the era where Christ's death takes care of everything. And that's the most significant and powerful act in all of history, and it is what grants us eternal life. But Jesus speaks pretty harshly about the way we listen to his instructions. In fact, he says, anyone who breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same, they'll be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Disobeying one of the least of the commandments or teaching anybody else that it's okay to disobey them, least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called the great in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus didn't come to abolish the law. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll actually look how he came to make them harder. He talked consistently about how murder becomes not just a behavior, but a thought pattern, and that anger is just as bad. He makes the law harder, not gets rid of it. So who are you going to be? The one who ignores it? Or the one who follows and is called the great?